It's been said that everybody's got a story to tell. Well, the person we're about to meet tonight, there's no group of people in America more prepared to argue their constitutional rights.
That's how we connect to each
Yeah.
other. That's how we connect to our communities. And that's what we tried to do here
Yes.
at the cafe.
I'm Earl Caldwell. I came to Scripps Howard. I came down to Hampton University. Dory Maynard, the late Dory Maynard, hooked it up about, she was trying to raise money for the Maynard Institute, and she was talking with a woman named Judy Claibs, who was the president of the Scripps Howard Foundation. And I don't know how it all came together. It was Dory trying to get this money, and Dory wanted me to help her, and Judy wanted me to come down to this university where she had built a journalism school, and this was in its first semester. I came down here. I'd never been to Hampton. I live in New York. They told me they would fly me down here. I said, no, I think I'll take the train. But I said, I want a seat on the Excella first class. And I said, just give me that to Washington. I said, I can get over to Hampton by myself. I thought Virginia was just right outside of Washington, D.C. I got the Excella. As a matter of fact, they have in New York a little special little reception area while you're waiting for the train in New York. And go into that little special section. White woman comes over to me and she says, "Are you the red cap?" I said, "I'm not wearing any red cap." Well, she said, "Could you help me with my bags?" I said, "No, I'm not helping you with your bags." Anyhow, I came down here. I came to Washington. I was shocked how far Hampton is from Washington, D.C. It's the first thing I learned. I got down here, and school was just being built, and it was so much excitement about it, and they asked me to talk, which was my responsibility. I made a talk to the students. I talked about my experience in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. People call me a conspiracy theorist, which is a bunch of bull. I'm a reporter. And I was there. And the assumption is, yeah, he was there, but he don't know nothing. Even I believe that. Ramparts magazine had an association with a publisher, I forget the name. They called me up after the assassination and said, "We'd like you to write a book." I said, "About what?" They said, "About your experiences." I said, "Listen, I don't know anything. I couldn't write a book. What would I write a book about?" But you don't know what you know. That's why when there's a killing or these things happen, the police investigate. If the police don't investigate, and there was nobody ever came to me and asked me anything. Where were you standing? What did you see? See anything the night before, morning? Nothing. And as almost every day passed, I would see something else. Didn't make sense. One thing and another and another. I'm not going to burden you with the 2-hour story. I can prove beyond not reasonable doubt, almost all doubt. Everything they've told us about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. is a fiction. All of it. And the biggest piece of it is that J. Edgar Hoover said that they used more agents and more man hours on the assassination of investigating Martin Luther King Jr. than any in the history of the Bureau, which was the biggest lie of all. because they didn't go door to door at the scene of the crime. Nobody ever knocked on my door to ask anything. Everybody I interviewed, nobody had talked to the FBI. They weren't investigating. They already had their story. All the things they did. But when I came to Hampton, made the speech, I talked about just what I was told you in a long form. And I wrote this book, and was represented at that time by a very famous agent in New York, Sterling Lord. And I thought I was going to be rich and famous. I really liked that rich part. Anyhow, my agent said, Earl, I got bad news for you. I said, what's that? He said, we got 33, 34 rejection letters. So that's all we have is rejection. They would not touch it. I couldn't believe it. Somebody called me from one of the publishing houses and said, I don't want to get my name, but I want you to know something. You shouldn't feel bad. He said to me, you have to wait 20, 30 years to tell a story like you're trying to tell. You can't tell a story like that now. Said, a lot of these people are still in office. They're still alive. He said, no. Nobody's touching that. I said, 30 years? He said, yes, yeah. Damn, black probably mean 50. Anyhow, I was so taken with the school, with the students, with the enthusiasm, and with the newness of everything. And at that time, I was doing an oral history for the Maynard Institute of black journalists like myself, who had a lot of experiences, but we couldn't get our work published in books. They would always come up with something. One of my students, I brought a lot of my stuff down here to Hampton. One day, one of my students come to me with a big fat envelope, and it was all of those rejection letters. I figured I wanted to put them on the internet and something, but I'm still going to do something with them. I don't know. But at any rate, I fell in love with the school. I was able to bring all of these journalists down here. They built a little studio for me in the library so we had a place to do all these interviews. And I said to a friend of mine, who I made friends, a faculty person, whose name was Kelly Harvey. She was the head of the TV side. Her last name was Harvey. Yes, she was the daughter of the president. She had left a job. She was a TV anchor at one of the local stations. She came in and started this. And I told her, I said, that, Jesus, it's just too bad. Bringing these journalists down. They've had these great careers, have these great stories. And I said, nobody but me is hearing them, and we're just recording it. And after they do that, they leave. No students even get to see them, let alone hear their stories. And about 2 or 3 days later, just like that, she came to me and said, I got an idea. In this very room, at that time, used to be little TV, things, computers and all that stuff was in here, and this was a TV studio, and she transformed it, and we had this little thing back here like this, so I bring my guests in here, and they would talk to the students. She put chairs in there, and over here on the side, she had something started way back at that wall, came all the way up here, food. She could get it because she had the connections. So we called it the Caldwell, that's what we eventually called it, the Caldwell Cafe. But it must have brought about 15 or 20 people here. We must have brought maybe 50, 75 guests here. We got it funded, and I was here. Scripps endowed a couple of chairs. I got one, and Judy Claves was announcing this at a big affair over in the student center, and she announced Earl Caldwell, and she said, in the way I consider this for Earl Caldwell, I think this is a lifetime appointment. And when she said that, I said, oh my God, Judy, you putting it on too thick. Anyhow, I was here for 2 years, got it, it was great. And then they said, Caldwell, we're moving you. And the president said he wanted me to stay here, and they hooked up something, and I've been here ever since. Today, I'm just so excited that you are here. When I say that you're here, I don't mean that you're in this room with me now. I mean that you're at Hampton University. I believe this network of black schools is one of our great assets that we don't even realize. We don't realize what this could be. Some things happened in my early time here. You've seen the building next door here. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. The student dining facility, big nice building, brand new building. When I came here, the students had a place over in the middle of the campus, old building. When you have an old building and you're dealing with food, it got a lot of different odors in there. One time the faculty dining room had to be closed. They were doing something. They told us that we're going to eat over in the student dining room. I went over there once. I said, I guess the students can handle it because they have. At any rate, the students began to tell stories in their newspaper about that dining facility that they had. And if you want to get a nice little model of the power of the press, those students, what they did and what the result was is this new building over here. I like that story. A lot of those kids, I mean, a lot of rough things happened to them, but they all wound up in news organizations working. In my lifetime, in my career, I should say, one of the things that I think I feel very comfortable in saying, especially in my time, was the institution of the news media was maybe the most segregated of all of them. I was working at the New York Times, and they had an editorial saying, the time has come when the Ford Foundation can no longer speak with an all-white board. I wanted to fall on the floor. They had an all-white board themselves. But, you know, particularly back then, because if they said, we're not going to publish it, we're not going to do it, that was the end of the line. Now you have the internet. I don't know. I can't even get my hands around it. When I came here to Hampton, I used to talk to my class. I would talk 90% of the time. So basically at Caldwell lecturing. And I would tell them, I talked about the years of what I called the Black Revolution. Really starting in 1964 with the riots, and Harlem was the first, and what we experienced, what happened. And I would talk about King and Malcolm, and about how we changed from being Negroes to being black, and afros instead of curls, and all of these things. And it was great. But more and more, you know, you're here, you begin to get engaged with the students, and you into their lives. And so I sort of turned it around in the classroom. Instead of me talking all the time, I wanted to listen. Now I want to say there's a time passed in this. One of the things that I was curious about is we had gotten at one time the Washington Post. I think we used to get about 60, 80 papers a day. They'd be out there in the rack. They'd be out there when we come to work in the morning, and except for the ones the faculty would take, they'd be out there at night. People used to come from other buildings to get them. And so I began to talk to my students about where do they get their news? And how does this work? Now, in my class, I try to talk at least 10%. I usually get 5. I listen to the students. One of the things is the students are so much smarter than they get credit for. They think about things more than they let on. I used to think that the students were not prepared because they were not saying things. Now I turn to classes. I said, here's what we're going to do. We'll take our things that we're going to discuss. You research it, and then you'll write a research paper, and then you'll come back to class and we'll debate these issues. And I try to follow along. I'm going to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to the LA Times. I tell the students, you got to give me your your prime source and two others. I'm wondering, are they making this stuff up, or are these real entities? I never heard of any of this. It's amazing. As the first time I realized there's two tracks of journalism going on in America. It's always, through all of my life in journalism, there's basically this one. The bigger papers, the bigger news organizations that had more resources could do more. I think there was a revolution in our time too, because Boeing come up with that Jet 707. You could go all over and fast, and so it was really changing things. And then as we began to come in, and particularly with the riots, the complexion in the newsrooms changed at the lower levels. We were so happy and excited about being a part of this, very passionate about having the opportunity to deal with stories not told. But what we weren't prepared for was what the reaction would be to us. 50 years ago, next year, 2020, be 50 years, there was a weekend. I don't know how many black reporters there were in the country then, but I believe about 80% of them were in a group. We slipped away from our jobs and went out to Jefferson City, Missouri, to Lincoln University. There's two Lincolns, one in Philly, one out west. We went out there. We went out there because someone had told us in research and said it's the oldest black journalism school in the country, and that's where we went. We got out there, actually, and the school's almost, I think that school, but when we got there, it's more white than black. We got in there and started having our meeting, and what we were trying to do was deal with what we could not imagine what was happening to us. This was in the time of Richard Nixon's presidency. John Mitchell's attorney was the Attorney General, and J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI. People look at those three slots now and say this is the worst of times. These folks back then, they were really something. And what the FBI says to the black journalists, you're in all these meetings, you hear what everybody's saying, you know what they're doing. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to help us. No, we'll work it out. You can make a phone call, talk every couple days, but we want you to do this. The first time the agents said that to me, I thought they were just, playing around. And then when I found out they were serious, I thought, geez, they don't understand the way the media works. They just don't know. I'm telling this guy, we couldn't do that even if we wanted to. Are you crazy? If we were being spies, people wouldn't even let us in the building. We couldn't even go. Long and the short is, the guy looked me right dead in the eye and said, you're going to do it. You are going to do it. I still didn't get it. What do you mean I'm going to do it? He said, you're going to do it. He told me, FBI agent, two of them, came into the New York Times. Guy says to me, if we were trying to look into some of these white hate groups and stuff, he said we'd be in here talking to some other reporters, white reporters, and they would help us. And he said, and you're going to help us too. I'll always remember, we had a black guy who was a receptionist before you could get into the newsroom. His name was Charlie Brown. Wonderful guy. There were 3 black reporters at the Times: Tom Johnson, Gerald Fraser, and myself. We soon doubled that number, tripled that number, but that's the way it was in 68, 69. Tom had been there the longest. He was a senior. We used to jokingly, lovingly refer to Charlie Brown as the spook who sits by the door. That was after a book a black guy had written about a black person in that role, and he had him in his novel. He was an agent. I told Charlie, I said, Charlie, would you call Fraser and tell him to come out here for a minute? He did. And Fraser came out and said, what's up? I said, these guys are FBI agents, and they won't let me go. They're demanding, like they're going to beat me up if I don't give them some information. Fraser said, so you don't have anything to say to him? You don't have anything? No. He said, well, and he yanked my arm and pulled me from between them, and we went back into the newsroom, just laughing and saying, oh, did we do it out there? And we thought that was the end, and that was the beginning. I think one of the reasons they started with a New York Times reporter, because if we flip him to being the others will fall in line. We went to Jefferson City, Missouri. We wanted to take full-page ads to the black community. We were getting these ads made and going to put them in the ads in the paper. Then we found out what the ads cost. Well, we couldn't even think about it. And then what we decided to do, we'll take the ads in the black paper. This is a copy of a full-page ad from 1970, from February of 1970, that was in the Amsterdam News in New York. What's very interesting about this ad, if you have time afterwards, check out the names on the bottom. These were all of our people, but we were not organized. We didn't even understand the importance of organizing, not until we went to Jefferson City and really saw the government. They believed that they were elephants, and they saw us that we were nothing more than ants, and that they could just trump us. They didn't have any. So anyhow, we passed a resolution there urging black journalists to organize and to develop a national organization. That happened 4 years, I think it was 1974. I thought when we started off that our destiny would be that we were the ones that could break through and tell these stories and do these things. In fact, our destiny would be, could we survive what the FBI, aided by the Attorney General, what they were not trying to do to us. I mean, they were in California. We did understand the growing importance of organizing. We had little groups. New York had one. We had one out in the Bay Area. When I say almost all the reporters in the country came out here to Jefferson City, except for the Washington Post, and they had more black reporters than any other paper in the country, but they were having a big confrontation with Ben Bradley and his editors at that time, so they had to stay there. But we were out in Jefferson City, and the most important thing that we did, I believe, was to pass the resolution to try to get a national organization, because we were not prepared. As it happened, we were very fortunate. And we were fortunate because in 1970, 1968, people trusted. There was a trust. It used to be called the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I think it was called that then. Now it's known as the Legal Defense Fund, based in New York. They could see in the newspapers what was happening and what was coming at us. And they got us a constitutional lawyer. Out in California, we had a little group, and we were just going around to lawyers that we knew. And most of them covered the lawyers for the Black Panther. All of them were criminal lawyers. So one day somebody said, "You need a constitutional lawyer." What I didn't really grasp then, I understand now. Black America, you know how people say, "Oh man, we're not prepared. We don't have this. We don't have that. We're not ready to combat this, combat that." One of the things that we did have was one of the greatest array of constitutional lawyers of any group in the United States, maybe outside of the government. These big corporations have a lot of constitutional lawyers too. But we have them because we had to fight every step of the way for our rights under the Constitution. So we had that. So they contacted the New York, we had a New York Association of Black Journalists. No, it was called Black Perspective. And they told them about this lawyer that Caldwell should contact him. He was a lawyer at Stanford University. And this lawyer, his name was Anthony Amsterdam. And he agreed to take this case with no fee. I had been saying, no, I'm not going to do it. They can't make me do it. But all that was leading to is you going to jail. In California, in my reporting, I became terrified of the prisons. One day, the warden at San Quentin asked me to come over to see him. I get over there in the morning, walk up to the guard shack, show him my credentials. He's turned them upside down, crossways and everything. I'm letting him do it because I know when he's done, he's going to say, "Go ahead now." And the guy looks at me, and I could just see the hatred in his face. He said, "You're not getting into this prison." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, he said, "You're not getting in." I said, "The warden told me to come over here." He said, "I don't care who told you, you're not getting in this prison." I said, "What is wrong with you? You tell me why I'm not getting in this prison." And he put his face about 2 inches from mine and said, "Because you look like a convict." When I go in to see the warden, I tell the warden says, don't worry. He said, "We got some problems. There's a lot of problems." And that was it. You're not going to do anything. Tony Amsterdam, we met him. Within 5 minutes of meeting him, he said to me, "I've been studying the case since it called from New York." He said, "You have a legal right to refuse." Well, that was like manna from heaven because I was saying I'm not going to do it, which means you're going to jail. And he said, "You have a legal right to refuse." Time doesn't allow me to tell you all about this case, but in California, before the Ninth Circuit, we won a total victory. Everything. They had a subpoena for me to appear before a federal grand jury investigating the Panthers, which the FBI agent told me right to my face, "If you don't do this, we're going to bring you before this federal grand jury." And he said, "I'm going to tell you something. A lot of the Panthers are going to think you were a spy all along and might be bad for your health." They were not playing. Tony Amsterdam said that the First Amendment not just protects information, notebooks, but it protects the reporting process. And if Caldwell's hauled before the federal grand jury, it would destroy him as a reporter. So I said to the government, "You have to prove that he has information that will going to help you. And you have to prove how you got that information." We could prove the FBI had broken into the New York Times bureau out in San Francisco. Nobody wanted to deal with that. They didn't even want to discuss it. The New York Times couldn't even bring itself to even just support us. We went to the Supreme Court in this case, arguing one thing, they're arguing something else. But we won a flat-out victory in California. We didn't, they couldn't subpoena me before the grand jury, but here's the way it ended. William Rehnquist was a lawyer in the Justice Department in this. He made a public speech before the Chamber of Commerce or somebody in D.C. Another reporter called me to tell me about it. I said, you wouldn't believe what this guy said about you. He subsequently got confirmed and was on the Supreme Court and cast the deciding vote against me. But when the case went to the Supreme Court, what the court did was, instead of just listening and going by Caldwell, which is the FBI is trying to force this reporter to be a spy against his sources, they added 2 other cases to it. They said they want to make a wide ruling. But the other 2 cases, I mean, the reporters are right in both cases, but they involve some criminal conduct. And that's what they wanted to get into the Panthers. The long and the short of it is, a part of what just makes me so excited about your being here is that you are organized. You have a strong, they cannot ignore you. I believe just that we had that unexpected development in our careers. I believe that this generation here now, you black reporters, you have a rendezvous with destiny. It's not that the media is broken. It is being torn asunder. It can't have a democracy without it. You are the ones that have to be in the forefront of putting this back together. You can do it because you're organized. They cannot discount you. You have coast to coast. You're all over the country. I wish you well. I believe you will rise to this challenge. We have to, I don't even know. That's why I listen to the students now. I'm trying to learn. Now, people know you don't hand Caldwell a microphone without somebody ready to snatch it out of his hand, because he's going to talk all day. But there's other panels that are here. They already showed me a sign that said 1 minute, and that was 10 minutes ago. But I'm glad to get a little piece of your time here. I hope you all will not be strangers here at this university. This journalism school needs you. The university needs you. A relationship, and it's not just Hampton. It's almost all of these black schools. I've had a chance to visit maybe a half a dozen of the journalism schools. You know, journalism comes in late. It doesn't get, and the money is not enough to go around. So, but I hope you'll be I hope that we'll see doing projects together. I hope you'll build a relationship we could see what it means. I wish you guys well. I'm delighted again that you're here. If you're walking around in the building, stop up on the 2nd floor. That's our cafe office. Come up there. I'd like to tell you we got some filet mignon, but we give you a bottle of water. Thank you guys, and again, it's just wonderful that you're here.